Thanks. Hmm. Hi, everyone. How are things? Hope you all are well. We are very well here as far as we know. Hi, Dolores. Hi, Kay. Hi, Lana. Nice to see you all. I guess from Lana's comment that Eric Weinstein is here. If you're here, Eric, then welcome. Steve Wolfbrandt is here. Kay is here. Hi, Kay. Nice to see you. Let's wait just a second in anticipation that a few more may join us. And then I'll get right started. In fact, I don't think I'm even going to wait. I think I'm just going to get started. So yesterday, I think we were asking, where's Bernie Sanders? What's going on with Bernie Sanders? Where in the world is Bernie Sanders? Well, thanks, Kay. And so, the first piece we're going to start off with today is about one Bernie Sanders. In particular, an article from Common Dreams today about a floor speech by Bernie Sanders, written by Jake Johnson. There's a picture of protesters being tear gassed by police near the White House on June 1st. I think you remember that. So Bernie Sanders on Wednesday, that was actually yesterday, though the article was today, demanded that as part of a broader legislative package aimed at curbing violence by law enforcement, but Bernie said that Congress must enact a ban on police use of rubber bullets, tear gas, and pepper spray against protesters. I think he should have included flashbangs too, to ensure that those exercising their basic constitutional rights in the streets across the United States are not treated like criminals. That was a quote from Bernie. I don't see the beginning of the quote there, but that was, I'm sorry. It's just before the R. Quote, are not treated like criminals. Quote again, we need to ban the use of rubber bullets, tear gas, and pepper spray on protesters. And we need to make certain that when people go to the street to protest, that their basic constitutional rights are not denied. Unquote. I think I would have said that their basic constitutional rights are protected because the police are supposed to protect our constitutional rights, not to deny them. But Bernie also called for an end to qualified immunity, quote unquote, a longstanding legal doctrine that gives police officers sweeping protections against lawsuits, and a ban on the transfer of military equipment to local police departments. Apropos of that, I suppose when the police in Minneapolis were caught passing through parking lots, slashing tires of protesters and reporters, that they were doing that under the doctrine of qualified by qualified immunity. And because if they weren't, then they would be subject at least to lawsuits if not to arrest, for malicious vandalism. That really got to me, though. This picture of police marching through parking lots, okay, and maliciously destroying property. I mean, the tires of those people's cars are property. They violated the property rights, okay, of those people. Then later, of course, they went on to violate their constitutional rights by beating up on people as well. But that was okay. But there are the property rights of people as well. And the police in Minneapolis were not even sparing those. Quote, the American people are rightly demanding justice and an end to police brutality and murder, said the Vermont senator. Quote, the U.S. Senate has got to act now, has got to hear the cries of justice that are coming from the streets of this country, that are coming from the African American community, from the white community, but from the Latino community, from all of our people. We must act, and we must act now. And you can watch Bernie's full speech. It was a good one, about a 20-minute speech. He went on to rip the Republican-controlled Senate for dragging its feet in approving COVID-19 relief as the U.S. surpassed 2 million confirmed cases of the virus, and experts warned of a new wave due to states reopening their economies without adequate safety precautions in place. Now, just for a minute, I'm going to stop watching this for a minute, stop sharing this, and begin to share another piece with you. Which deals with what the experts had to say. And this one is from Julia Conley, who was also today. Public health officials urge caution as 14 states report surge in COVID-19 infections after reopening. And that's a picture of a person getting a swab test at a free pop-up testing location in the Roxbury section of Boston on June 10th. Public health experts cautioned on Wednesday that all signs point to the coronavirus pandemic continuing to spread this summer, especially in certain parts of the United States after 14 states showed spikes in COVID-19 cases. Arizona has reported one of the most alarming increases in cases this month, about a month after the state's stay-at-home order expired. They had a stay-at-home order. They opened up about a month ago. And here we are. Definite community spread. 2 weeks after the state began reopening, just after the incubation period for COVID-19 passed, the Washington Post reported the state began seeing a significant uptick in daily cases. In late May, Arizona reported about 200 new cases per day. This week, officials have seen about 1,400 new infections per day. Hospitalizations and deaths have also increased, I might add, of course. Every state should watch and pick up these lessons, tweeted former Obama administration healthcare official Andy Slavitt, referencing the spike in cases in the state last week. And there's a graphic on the new cases and how they spiked over the weeks since the reopening about a month ago on April 29th. Anyway, the spikes also come as protests have been taking place in cities and communities nationwide over the last 2 weeks. Of course, we don't know what the impact of that is going to be on COVID, but experts are pretty sure it's going to lead to some increases in cases and some deaths. ABC News reported Thursday that Arkansas, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and Utah have also seen a rise in the number of coronavirus-related hospitalizations. In Arkansas, hospitals are taking in 88% more COVID-19 patients than they were before Memorial Day. And in South Carolina, 12 counties have reached 75% capacity at their hospitals. But state officials who pushed to reopen early are reticent to revisit stay-at-home orders, even if their healthcare systems become overwhelmed. They're very stupid, I think. If their public healthcare systems do get overwhelmed in these various states, the career of the governor of such a state is over when people begin to die. These governors are crossing their fingers and risking their careers. The same day, the top epidemiologist of the state, Belinda Bell, said to reporters, "I'm more than concerned about COVID-19 in South Carolina than I have ever been before." Montana, Hawaii, and Alaska have also reported infection increases in the past 2 weeks, but their overall case numbers remain low. Casey Ernst, an infectious disease expert at the University of Arizona, said people in states with rising case numbers may have largely abandoned precautions pushed by public health officials as their state leaders reopen the economy. And she suggested many people equate the reopening with being safe, she said to ABC News. While there is certainly some uptake of masks and physical distancing, it is not ubiquitous, she said. Not ubiquitous. Now, Donald Trump is planning to visit a number of states in coming weeks and to hold his campaign rallies again. And the New York Times reported on Wednesday that Trump's campaign is, quote, unlikely to put into place any social distancing measures for rally attendees or require them to wear masks, unquote, as the president visits Arizona, Texas, Florida, and North Carolina, hoping to draw large crowds. Maybe this is Donald Trump's plan for voter suppression. Quote, worst times are ahead. But Joe Gerald, a public health researcher at the University of Arizona, told the Post, quote, the preponderance of evidence indicates community transmission is increasing, unquote. That's got to be the understatement of the year. Right? Right. I'll stop sharing that. So let's go back to Bernie again. And take up the story where we left off. The Vermont Senator went on to rip the Republican-controlled Senate for dragging its feet in approving additional COVID-19 relief as the U.S. surpassed 2 million confirmed cases of the virus. Experts warned of a new wave due to states reopening their economies without adequate safety precautions in place. And just to remind you of what's going on here, yes, we did pass the 2 million mark here in the United States. To be specific, on my tracker, we're now close to 2,100,000. We're at 2,089,684 cases. And the total number of people deceased has hit 116,000 in the United States. And for the last 2 days, well, we were 1,000 fatalities just yesterday. We had 1,000 fatalities just yesterday. And thus far today, we are approaching 1,000 fatalities. We have 900 fatalities. That was at 8:40 p.m. Eastern Time. We have a considerable part of the day to go in some of the very states that have had increasing fatalities and increasing number of cases. So we have a very good chance of making that extra 100 fatalities and reaching 1,000 fatalities again. Hope I don't have to remind you that 1,000 fatalities a day is equivalent to 30,000 fatalities per month. And fatalities are on the increase again. So back to the burn. Quote, "This is the worst do-nothing Senate in modern American history," said Sanders, who slammed Senator Mitch McConnell, the majority leader, for pushing off coronavirus aid as tens of millions of people across the U.S. remain out of work, hungry, and in fear of losing their homes. And don't forget, tens of millions of people have also lost their health care coverage because they're out of jobs. So they remain out of work, hungry, in fear of losing their homes, and also in fear of going to see a doctor if they need to go see one because they can't afford it and would have to pay for it. Sanders calling for a sweeping legislative package that includes a paycheck guarantee, also Medicare expansion to cover the uninsured and the underinsured, monthly $2,000 emergency payments to U.S. households. There's the Jayapal Tlaib bill. The Paycheck Guarantee bill, of course, is the Jayapal bill. And the Medicare expansion is one of the Bernie bills. And quote, "We must act boldly and aggressively to protect the American people in the midst of this crisis," the senator says. Anyone who thinks this is not a moment of urgency does not understand what the word urgency means. When people in America go hungry, we have got to act. When people are being evicted from their apartments or losing their homes, we have got to act. And we have got to act now, not a month from now, not 2 months from now, but we have to act, I'll add, right now. So that's what Bernie is calling for. But Moscow Mitch, of course, has nothing to say about that. Now let's drop off for a moment to lighter matters and note, as I did last night, I think, maybe a little too briefly, that Paula Jean Swearengin won in West Virginia. Paula Jean, of course, is a backer of the Green New Deal and is a backer, okay, of Medicare for All. And there she is, the coal miner's daughter and granddaughter with a progressive vision for West Virginia, won the Democratic primary in the U.S. Senate race Tuesday, and will now work to oust Republican incumbent Senator Shelley Moore Capito. Don't know how she pronounces it. Jessica Corbett wrote this one on June 10th. And Paula Jean said this movement is a battle cry from Appalachia and for people across this country. West Virginians are done waiting for politicians to do the right thing. The people of this state are ready to return our government to one of, by, and for the people. And she tweeted that too. And here's a graphic. This movement is ready to fight all the way to the U.S. Senate, said Paula Jean. Along with Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Democrat of New York. Swearengin was featured in the 2019 Netflix documentary Knock Down the House for unsuccessful 2018 primary challenge to Senator Joe Manchin, widely considered the chamber's most conservative Democrat. Also in Knock Down the House was Amy Vilela, but she's a Nevada Democrat who was unsuccessful in her run for Congress at that time, but who literally drove the incumbent out of the race and then was defeated by a Democratic establishment type who had all the funding. That was very unfortunate because Amy was another firebrand for Medicare for All. With 98% of the precincts reporting, Swearengin on Tuesday earned nearly 40% of the vote, more than either West Virginia state senator, Senator Richard Ojeda, or attorney Richie Robb, according to the New York Times. Okay, Ojeda got 33% of the vote, and Richie Robb got 29.1% of the vote. And the incumbent, Shelley Moore Capito, easily won the GOP primary. Paula Jean got congratulations from Zenas Bezakis, running for Congress in the New Jersey 9th, who said, "I'm thrilled at your victory. A victory for one is a victory for all." Paula Jean Swearengin said, "Results are rolling in. Our team is watching closely, and the numbers are looking good." And Paula Jean won convincingly, okay, even though Robin Ojeda got a considerable number of votes as well. Still, Paula Jean won but by a margin that one can say she won fairly easily. Now, what about her chances against the Republican Moore Capito? I'll say this. Her chances are much better against Moore Capito than they were against Joe Manchin. And she gave Joe Manchin a challenge in 2018. There's no question about that. So I think she has a good chance to win now that she's through the primary. That said, West Virginia is a very red state, has lost confidence, in Democrats who dominated the state for years and years and years. Joe Manchin, of course, is hardly a Democrat. Still, it was a victory for brand new Congress, for Blue America, for Flip the Senate, for Save Main Street, and for progressives rising, and future generations, 90 for 90, and the Eastern Panhandle Green Coalition, and Progressive Democrats for America, and Forward Thinking Democracy. Those are the organizations that endorsed her. It was a particularly big victory for brand new Congress, I think. So good luck to Paula Jean. We're certainly in back of her here. She's a Bernie Sanders Democrat. There's no question about that. And there's a video attached to this article. Okay, it's the video of the emotional scene between Bernie, and Paula Jean when he was campaigning in West Virginia. And I recommend you take a look at this video after we're done here. It's a very moving video. So I'm going to leave that now. And I want to come back to our main theme tonight, which is when governments don't serve the people and don't serve the public purpose, they need to be soundly defeated by the people. That needs to happen all over the country. Let's look at by Dave Dayen's column from yesterday on June the 10th. Because Dave shows us there, brings home what is going on right now. What is going on right now? So I'll share that. Here's a picture of protests, in Mesa, Arizona, probably the highest concern area for COVID-19 in the U.S. on Tuesday. Many protesters aren't wearing masks. Yes, Arizona people don't like to wear masks. So yesterday, we learned that two D.C. National Guard members, well, to be fair, in Arizona today, they have an impossible heat wave, 110, 115, I don't know. It's very, very, very hot. And close to Tucson, there are wildfires right now. And Nomiki Konst was on tonight, driving around trying to find out how close the wildfires were to her grandmother's house, where she, her mother, and her grandmother are all staying at this point. So yesterday we learned that two D.C. National Guard members who were part of the response to protests after the death of George Floyd tested positive for COVID-19. Given the typical gestation period, it's possible they caught the virus during the mass demonstrations, but a bit more likely that they already had it in their system beforehand. They joined two members of the National Guard who responded to protests in Lincoln, Nebraska, and a maskless protester in Lawrence, Kansas, all of whom have tested positive. The latter received a test on June 4th and participated in the protest May 31st. So he almost certainly had the virus when he went out in public with thousands of people without a mask to peaceably assemble. And in parens, we know that because of contact tracing, he was asked about his use of a mask. So many of those protests have not been so peaceful, with police using tear gas and pepper spray, causing more emissions through sneezing and coughing. Lots of police aren't wearing masks, which is more harmful to others than themselves. In general, masks are optional in the field. Nobody wants to say it. Politicians are walking on eggshells over it, but it's just very obvious that a decent sample of the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, who have attended protests in the past couple of weeks either had coronavirus when they marched or contracted it on site. If you ask people directly, they understand this. An Axios Ipsos poll showed that 86% of those who were surveyed fear infection during mass protests. This hasn't stopped large crowds from gathering, though, and that's going to make this crisis worse. It just is. How much worse is an open question, but worse is undeniable. It is. Ironically, fears of demonstration have made other more routine and perhaps just as dangerous events look more mundane by comparison. People are flooding casinos, and anyone so in need of gambling action that they don't wait a week for reopening to return to the tables is maybe going to take unnecessary risks by nature. But catch this. AMC plans to reopen, quote, almost all, unquote, its theaters next month. I predict they're not going to do very well here, in Ashburn, Virginia, because the COVID picture is not looking too good here either. The level of the outbreak in a particular state seems not to be playing a role in that decision. Restaurants and retail shops and dental offices are engaged in modified openings. But the people's mobility is up about 20 percentage points off the bottom. and the results are trickling in. Tesla workers forced back in uh, Elon Musk's revolutionary reopening fantasy are starting to test positive. We're all guilty of letting our guard down. I got a haircut yesterday. I'm right there with you. I wore a mask, as did the barber, and I got a temperature check before entering. But these are nods, okay, at protection, only nods. My state and my county is seeing cases and deaths steadily rise. Pretty sure Dave lives somewhere in the Los Angeles area, so we're talking California here. And while some of that is due to increased testing, the widely linked Washington Post study says about 14 states were hitting a high on their 7-day average of cases, but doesn't mention at all in states like Arizona, cases are rising faster than tests. More important, hospitalizations are on the rise in 9 states. And most states are not making progress toward reopening safely, judged by testing, tracing, and hospital readiness. The protests will make things worse, but the everyday nonchalance, the surrender to the virus, might do even more. The virus doesn't care if you consider your cause just or you have to get the mounds of hair off your head. Really, it was getting ridiculous. It just will travel from host to host. The good news is that the aggregate statistics have been gradually getting better, but that snapshot is about 2 or 3 weeks downstream from the infection point, and it says nothing about individual states. It's also just about capturing a portion of overall cases, sicknesses, and deaths. The maligned by University of Washington study is finally pointing out that the virus will not burn out by August. It now has 550 deaths on its final projected day, August 4th. That's still 550 deaths a day on August 4th. That's 2 months from now. And it's still not projecting lower than 550 deaths. Dave says it's just going to be living with us in the background now. We've decided that it's worth dying to live normally. We decided that with access to guns. We decided that with the coronavirus. And the White House decided it a long time ago. And now the rest of us have taken our cues. And I see no reason to believe. I see no reason to believe that Americans will be asked to lock down again or that they'll comply. What we know about this virus is that we don't know everything or even very much. Now, this really spooks me, this idea that we don't even know very much. People have been catching this virus in certain parts of the world since December and maybe earlier. And in the United States, probably since January. Hundreds of thousands of confirmed cases in the United States, 2 million confirmed cases, over 2 million confirmed cases. And we don't know very much about it. 116,000 fatalities, and we still don't know very much about it. I mean, it is mind-boggling. Dave says, maybe there won't be a new spike. Maybe we can be a lot more comfortable about outdoor transmission. Maybe the virus has mutated into something harder to spread. Okay, or maybe sunshine and the humidity are factors. But we have no idea today, and our actions, regardless of our intentions, signal that we don't care about our friends or families and ourselves. And that's frightening. That is frightening. To me, anyway. We should, of course, be caring about all three. But if we don't care about our friends or families, we don't care about ourselves, how can we expect the people who represent us in Congress to care about us? How can we expect Donald Trump to care about us? We have to care about our friends, our families, and ourselves enough to keep squawking about how our representatives are not doing all that they can do to protect us, to allow us to continue to stay home and to stay isolated to the extent that is possible. The only reason why there appears to be a trade-off between the economy and COVID-19 is because Congress and the executive are unwilling to do all that they can do to cushion the blow of a largely shut down economy. It rests within their power to do what needs to be done. To go back to Bernie's plea, the Paycheck Guarantee Act can be passed. As a matter of fact, the Job Guarantee Program, where people operate out of their houses, can be passed. A basic income of $2,000 per person can be passed. A bill that extends Medicare for all, or creates Medicare for all, for everyone in the United States for as long as the emergency lasts, that can be passed. There are no financial barriers to passing that. That's what Stephanie Kelton's book is about. That's what a lot of my writing and my live streams are about. That is what the MMT point of view is about. We know that there are no financial barriers. More and more congressional people are learning that each day, and many know about it now. It is a crime that they will act on behalf of the people, on behalf of public purpose. Dave says, I listened yesterday to a Senate Finance Committee hearing with Labor Secretary Eugene Scalia about the enhanced unemployment program from the CARES Act. which now has about a month and a half left to run. The battle lines between the parties have been drawn. Republicans almost unanimously said the program has run its course and now creates a disincentive to work, because you can make more money on the dole than at a low-wage job. Hilariously, Bill Cassidy, Republican of the, I think AK is Alaska, okay, Republican of Alaska, cited Larry Summers on this point. If the program creates a disincentive to work because you can make more money on the dole than at a low-wage job, that is not a bug. That is a feature to protect people from COVID. We don't want people at risk to go back to work. We don't want that work to be done because it risks the lives of people, and it is not needed during this period. If such work is needed, then those workers can be given hazard pay so that there is a financial incentive to come to work and to risk getting ill. So Democrats, says Dave, almost unanimously said there are still 20 million Americans out of work, and no reason to expect that all or even most of them will be gainfully employed by July 31st, the expiration date of the CARES Act enhancement. The nearly 2 million unemployment claims filed last week tripled the number of any claims filed in any week during the Great Recession, said Senator Ron Wyden, a Democrat of Oregon, an architect of the enhanced unemployment program. Quote, big corporations are getting trillions of dollars in support toward this crisis, but Congress is going to start pinching pennies when the little guy needs help, unquote. And to add to this, is Congress going to start pinching pennies when it's becoming clearer and clearer these days that deficits are no problem? They're refusing to give the little guy any help when they don't need to worry about the deficit even? What kind of inhuman Congress is this? What kind of monsters inhabit this Congress? Why should not every one of them, standing with Mitch McConnell and the Republicans, why shouldn't every one of them be voted out of office? Every one of them who's up for re-election anyway. Dave goes on. The answer to that is yes. Scalia, repeating the White House line, said that the CARES Act on the benefits should not be a deterrent to resuming work, quote unquote. I beg to differ. At the same time, he touted the 2.5 million gain in the May jobs report, which happened while enhanced unemployment was in place. And Dave remarks, okay, the deterrence story and the celebration of America returning to work don't fit together. No, they don't. There is a contradiction there. Wyden's questions signal where Democrats could be headed on the question. He repeatedly asked Scalia if states had the capability to implement 100% wage replacement on an individual level for workers. Scalia dodged the question every time. Wyden also talked about aligning unemployment support to economic conditions, a sort of trigger where benefits stay in place while state rates of unemployment fall below a certain level. Economist Dean Baker has also suggested tying the enhancement to pandemic control, which is pretty tenuous since spikes can happen very quickly. It may be tenuous, but it might be done because a trigger can operate pretty quickly as well. The idea of a trigger, anyway, is tied in closely with the idea of an automatic stabilizer. Scalia threw it back on Congress, which set the enhancement to expire by July 31st. And he's right, says Dave. The automatic stabilizer should have been negotiated from the beginning. But responding to Senator Michael Bennet, Democrat of Colorado, the other architect of the program, Scalia acknowledged that having tens of millions on unemployment after July 31st without a boost was untenable. Quote, it does make sense for us to consider, particularly as we get close to that July 31st data, what measures may be necessary, unquote. So now they're playing games in Washington. The Republicans are thinking about the kind of boost that could be given by July 31st, but they want to make use of the time between now and July 31st. They want to stall. Why do they want to stall? Well, maybe partly it's because they believe that maybe they won't have to give a boost because maybe things are going to get better. But if things don't get better, then they're also in a position that they could develop another relief bill by July 31st that had some obnoxious provisions that maybe Democrats would not like. But if the relief bill also delivers the kind of relief which Democrats are looking for most of the people, maybe then the Democrats can be persuaded to give Trump some of the very unpalatable and immoral things that he would like to get into that bill. So that is what this is about. Trump knows that he's going to need a further boost, or he suspects it anyway, pretty strongly, because there have been a number of reports of late that the White House is beginning to get worried, and they're beginning to talk to McConnell. Okay, and Mnuchin is beginning to get worried. And he's also starting to talk to the president, about that. That if they can just wait and not have to do anything in June and get to go home and then come back for a short time this summer and ram through another ridiculous bill that maybe helps for a few months but keeps people on the hook for good. Maybe that's their strategy. And then with each round, they get concessions from the Democrats. Maybe that's what they're playing for here. More tax cuts for the rich, more goodies for the wealthy, while playing to the crowd. Maybe they're even trying to find two things that so that they get a sudden burst in the economy just before the election. They're stupid enough to think they can engineer that. Who knows? He admitted to Senator Robert Menendez, Democrat of New Jersey, that OSHA has received as many as 20,000 complaints and made only one citation against the workplace for hazardous post-pandemic work conditions. Senator Wyden said, quote, "Nobody should have to choose between their health and their income." He noted, that Americans have the right to stay on unemployment if the workplace they're asked to return to is unsuitable. Scalia tried to say that state law governs workplace safety, which was amazing and rather untrue, and that a rejection of an unsafe workplace needs to be rooted in facts, not simply generalized fear. He would not commit to putting in writing that nobody can lose unemployment benefits because of due to a safe workplace. Dave says this will probably play out in the courts. So there it is. So COVID is coming back. Looks like we're getting the second wave. Looks like we've given up the fight against it. Looks like we're crossing our fingers. Looks like we don't care about ourselves, our families, and our friends. And at the same time, it looks like the Republicans and some Democrats are stalling about when it comes to giving people what they really need, which is the paycheck guarantee and the basic income, and a Medicare for all provision for the duration of the crisis. The things Bernie has called for, the things that are in accordance with public purpose and with what the people need, and also with what the people want. So, I want to share now an article that gives the lie to the idea that we ought to give up and just take COVID as it comes. I picked up the article in Portside. And the title of it is How Che Guevara Taught Cuba to Confront COVID-19. Now, you might wonder how that could possibly be the case, since Che Guevara is long dead. And COVID is a new invention. And you just saw a photo, I scrolled a photo, of Cuban doctors heading to Italy to battle the coronavirus. So beginning in December 1951, yes, nearly 70 years ago, Che Guevara took a 9-month break from medical school to travel by motorcycle through Argentina, Chile, Peru, Colombia, and Venezuela. One of his goals was gaining practical experience with leprosy. On the night of his 24th birthday, Che was at La Colonia de San Pablo, in Peru, swimming across the river to join the lepers. He walked among 600 lepers in jungle huts, looking after themselves in their own way. Che would not have been satisfied to just study and sympathize with them. He wanted to be with them and understand their existence. Being in contact with people who were poor and hungry while they were sick transformed Che. He envisioned a new medicine with doctors who would serve the greatest number of people, with preventive care and public awareness of hygiene. A few years later, Che joined the Fidel Castro's 26th of July movement as a doctor and was among the 81 men aboard the Granma as it landed in Cuba on December 2nd, 1956. After the January 1st, 1959 victory that overthrew Fulgencio Batista, the new Cuban Constitution included Che's dream of free medical care for all as a human right. An understanding of the failings of disconnected social systems led the revolutionary government to build hospitals and clinics in underserved parts of the island. Excuse me. I forgot to mention the author of the piece. He's Don Fitz. It was written on June 8th and originally published in the Monthly Review, which is a rather hardline socialist journal that has been around for a very, very long time, since I was young, in fact. An understanding of the failings of disconnected social systems led the revolutionary government to build hospitals and clinics in underserved parts of the island, at the same time that it began addressing crises of literacy, racism, poverty, and housing. Cuba overhauled its clinics both in 1964 and again in 1974 to better link communities and patients. By 1984, Cuba had introduced doctor-nurse teams who lived in the neighborhoods where they had offices. These are called consultorios. The United States became ever more bellicose. So in 1960, Cuba organized committees for defense of the revolution to defend the country. The committees prepared to move the elderly, disabled, sick, and mentally ill to higher ground if a hurricane approached, thus intertwining domestic health care and foreign affairs, which is a connection that has persisted throughout Cuba's history. As Cuba's medical revolution was based on extending medical care beyond the major cities and into the rural communities that needed it the most, it was a short step to extend that assistance to other nations. The revolutionary government sent doctors to Chile after a 1960 earthquake and a medical brigade in 1963 to Algeria, which was fighting for independence from France. These actions set the stage for the country's international medical aid, which grew during the decades and now includes helping treat the COVID-19 pandemic. In the early 1980s and early 90s, two disasters threatened the very existence of the country. The first victim of AIDS died in 1986. In December 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, ending its $5 billion annual subsidy, disrupting international commerce, and sending the Cuban economy into a freefall that exacerbated the AIDS epidemic. A perfect storm for AIDS infection appeared on the horizon. The HIV infection rate for the Caribbean region was second only to Southern Africa, where a third of a million Cubans had recently been during the Angolan Wars. The embargo on the island reduced the availability of drugs, including those for HIV and AIDS, made existing pharmaceuticals outrageously expensive, and disrupted the financial infrastructures used for drug purchases. Desperately needing funds, Cuba opened the floodgate of tourism, bringing an increase in sex exchanged for money. The government drastically reduced services in all areas except two: education and healthcare. Its research institutes developed Cuba's own diagnostic test for HIV by 1987. Over 12 million tests were completed by 1993. By 1990, when gay people had become the island's primary HIV victims, homophobia was officially challenged in schools. Condoms were provided for free at doctors' offices, and despite the expense, so were antiretroviral drugs. Cuba's united and well-planned effort to cope with HIV/AIDS paid off. In the early 1990s, at the same time Cuba had 200 AIDS cases, New York City, with about the same population, had 43,000 cases. Despite having only a small fraction of the wealth and resources of the United States, Cuba had overcome the devastating effects of the U.S. blockade and had implemented an AIDS program superior to that of the countries seeking to destroy it. During this special period, Cubans experienced longer lives and lower infant mortality rates in comparison to the United States. Cuba inspired healers throughout the world to believe that a country with a coherent and caring medical system can thrive, even against tremendous odds. Overcoming the HIV/AIDS and special period crises that prepared Cuba for COVID-19. Aware of the intensity of the pandemic, Cuba knew that it had two inseparable responsibilities: to take care of its own with a comprehensive program and to share its capabilities internationally. The government immediately carried out a task that proved very difficult in a market-driven economy: altering the equipment of nationalized factories, which usually made school uniforms, to manufacture masks. These provided an ample supply for Cuba by the middle of April 2020, while the United States, with its enormous productive capacity, was still suffering a shortage. I might add that it is June in the United States now, and the United States is still suffering a shortage. If I want an N95 mask today for myself, I cannot go to a local store here and buy one. I can find one on the web now, perhaps, but only from suppliers that I have no experience with and do not necessarily trust. From my point of view, we still haven't solved the problem of manufacturing masks that will largely protect people from the virus itself. But Cuba has. They did it 2 months ago. Discussions at the highest levels of the Cuban Ministry of Public Health drew up the national policy. There would need to be massive testing to determine who had been infected. Infected persons would need to be quarantined while ensuring they had food, cane, and other necessities. Contact tracing would be used in order to determine who else might be exposed. It would be necessary for medical staff to go door to door to check on the health of every citizen. Consultorial staff would give special attention to everyone in the neighborhood who might be high risk. If we had consultorios here, then high risk people, which is to say, all people who are my age or older, in fact, most probably people who are over 65 or over 70, would be given special attention by the equivalent of consultorios if we had that kind of a healthcare system. Of course, we don't. By March 2nd, Cuba had instituted the novel coronavirus plan for prevention and control. Within 4 days, it expanded the plan to include taking the temperature of and possibly isolating infected incoming travelers. These occurred before Cuba's first confirmed COVID-19 diagnosis on March 11th. Cuba had its first confirmed COVID-19 fatality by March 22nd, when there were 35 confirmed cases, almost 1,000 patients being observed in hospitals, and over 30,000 people under surveillance at home. The next day, it banned the entry of non-resident foreigners, which took a deep bite into the country's tourism revenue. That was the day that Cuba's civil defense went on alert to respond rapidly to COVID-19, and the Havana Defense Council decided there was a serious problem in the city's Vedado district, famous for being the largest home to non-tourist foreign visitors who were more likely to have been exposed to the virus. By April 3rd, the district was closed. As Mariam Ansara witnessed, quote, anyone with a need to enter or leave must prove that they have been tested and are freed of COVID-19, unquote. The civil defense made sure stores were supplied and all vulnerable people received regular medical checks. Vedado had 8 confirmed cases. It's a lot for a small area. Cuban health officials wanted the virus to remain at the, quote, local spread, unquote, stage when it can be traced while going from one person to another. They sought to prevent it from entering the community spread stage when tracing is not possible because it is moving out of control. As U.S. health professionals begged for personal protective equipment, and testing in the United States was so sparse that people had to ask to be tested rather than health workers testing contacts of infected patients. Cuba had enough rapid test kits to trace contacts of persons who had contracted the virus. During late March and early April, Cuban hospitals were also changing work patterns to minimize contagion. Havana doctors went into Salvador Allende Hospital for 15 days, staying overnight within an area designated for medical staff. Then they moved to an area separate from patients where they lived for another 15 days and were tested before returning home. They stayed at home without leaving for another 15 days and were tested before resuming their practice. This 45-day period of isolation prevented medical staff from by bringing disease to the community via their daily trips to and from their work. The medical system extends from the consultorio to every family in Cuba. Third, fourth, and fifth year medical students are assigned by consultorio doctors to go to specific homes each day. Their tasks include obtaining survey data from residents or making extra visits to the elderly, to infants, and those with the respiratory problems. These visits gather preventive medicine data that is then taken into account by those in the highest decision-making positions of the country. When students bring their data, doctors use a red pen to mark hotspots where extra care is necessary. Neighborhood doctors meet uh, uh, at clinics on a regular basis to talk about what each doctor is doing, what they are discovering, what new procedures the Cuban Ministry of Public Health is adopting, and how the intense work is affecting medical staff. In this way, every Cuban citizen and every healthcare worker, from those at neighborhood doctor offices to those at the most esteemed research institute, plays a part in determining health policy. Cuba currently has 89,000 doctors, 84,000 nurses, and 9,000 students scheduled to graduate from medical studies in 2020. The Cuban people would not tolerate the head of the country ignoring medical advice, spouting nonsense, and determining policy based on what would be most profitable for corporations. The Cuban government approved free distribution of the homeopathic medicine Prevengovir to residents of Havana and Pinar del Rio province. Susanna Herlick was one of many receiving it. On April 8th, Dr. Yazin, one of three doctors at the consultorio 2 blocks from her home, came to the door with a small bottle of the Prevengovir and explained how to use it. Instructions warn that it reinforces the immune system, but is not a substitute for interferon alpha 2b, nor is it a vaccine. Herlick believes that something important about Cuba's medical system is that rather than being two-tiered, as is often the case in other countries, with classical medicine on the one hand and alternative medicine on the other, Cuba has one health system that includes it all. When you study to become a doctor, you also learn about homeopathic medicine in all its forms. And the next section is called Global Solidarity in the Time of COVID-19. But this is a powerful model, perhaps the most critical component of Cuba's medical internationalism during the COVID-19 crisis has been using its sorry, I scrolled too far. Has been using its decades of experience to create an example of how a country can confront the virus with a compassionate and competent plan. Public health officials around the world were inspired by Cuba's actions. Transfer of knowledge. When viruses that cause Ebola, mainly found in sub-Saharan Africa, increased dramatically in the fall of 2014, much of the world panicked. Soon, over 20,000 people were infected, more than 8,000 had died, and worries mounted that the death toll could reach into hundreds of thousands. The United States sent as military support. Other countries promised financial aid. Cuba was the first nation to respond with what was most needed. It sent 103 nurses and 62 volunteers, doctor volunteers, to Sierra Leone. Since many governments did not know how to respond to the disease, Cuba trained volunteers from other nations at Havana's Pedro Cure Institute of Tropical Medicine. In total, Cuba taught 13,000 Africans, 66,000 66 thousand Latin Americans and 620 Caribbeans how to treat Ebola without themselves becoming infected, sharing understanding on how to organize a healthcare system is the highest level of knowledge transfer. It is. Venezuela has attempted to replicate fundamental aspects of the Cuban health model on a national level, which has served Venezuela well in combating COVID-19. 2018, the residents of Altos de Lidiche organized 7 communal councils, including one for community health. A resident made space in his home available to the communal healthcare system initiative so that Dr. Gutierrez could have an office. He coordinates data collections to identify at-risk residents and visits all residents in their homes to explain how to avoid infection by COVID-19. Nurse Del Val Marquez is a Chavista who helped implement the Barrio Adentro when the first Cuban doctors arrived. She remembers that residents had never seen a doctor inside their community. But when the Cubans arrived, quote, we opened our doors to the doctors. They lived with us, they ate with us, and they worked among us, unquote. Stories like this permeate Venezuela. As a result of building a Cuban-type system, Telecer reported that by April 11th, 2020, the Venezuelan government had conducted 181,335 early polymerase chain reaction tests in time to have the lowest infection rate in Latin America. But Venezuela had only 6 infections per million citizens, while neighboring Brazil in the same time period had 104 infections per million. Now, probably in both countries, it's hard to measure infections. When Rafael Correa was president of Ecuador, over 1,000 Cuban doctors formed the backbone of its healthcare system. When Lenin Moreno was elected in 2017, this is kind of ironic because he was the Lenin, of course, and Cuban doctors were soon expelled, leaving public medicine in chaos. While Moreno followed the IMF, the recommendations to slash Ecuador's health budget by 36%, leaving it without healthcare professionals, without PPE, and above all, without a coherent healthcare system. While Venezuela and Cuba had 27 COVID-19 deaths, Ecuador's largest city, Guayaquil, had an estimated death toll of 7,600. International medical response. Cuban medicine is perhaps best known for its internationalism. Well, I'm not going to go into all of this now because it's getting late and I need to turn to your comments. Suffice it to say that by 2008, Cuba had sent over 120,000 healthcare professionals to 154 countries. Its doctors had cared for over 70 million people in the world, and almost 2 million people owed their lives to Cuban medical services in their country. When COVID-19 spread throughout the world, Cuba had 37,000 medical workers in 67 countries. On April 16th, the Granma reported that 21 brigades of healthcare professionals have been deployed to join national and local efforts in 20 countries, unquote. And that very same day, Cuba sent 200 health personnel to Qatar, which, by the way, is a place that has a very large American air base. I wonder if those doctors treated any of our armed forces while they were there. As northern Italy became the epicenter of COVID-19 cases, one of the hardest hit cities was Crema, in the Lombardy region. The emergency room in its hospital was filled to capacity. On March 26, Cuba sent 52 doctors and nurses to set up a field hospital with 3 intensive care units and 32 other beds with oxygen. A smaller and poorer Caribbean nation was one of the few aiding a major European power. Cuba's intervention took its toll. By April 17th, 30 of its medical professionals who went abroad tested positive for COVID-19. Also, Cuba has brought people from overseas to the island, both students and patients. The training organization it opened is called the Latin American School of Medicine, ELAM. By 2020, ELAM had trained 30,000 doctors from over 100 countries. Well, this is too long, so I have to wind this up. I'm afraid. Though I think it's really a wonderful account. In 1981, they had a bad outbreak, of dengue fever, in Cuba. In order to treat this, one of the research institutes in Cuba created interferon alpha 2b to successfully treat dengue fever. As Helen Yaffa points out, Cuba's interferon, quote, has shown its efficacy and safety in the therapy of viral diseases, including hepatitis B and C, shingles, HIV, AIDS, and dengue fever. It accomplished this by preventing complications that could worsen a patient's condition and result in death. The efficacy of the drug persisted for decades, and in 2020, it became vitally important as a potential cure for COVID-19. What also survived was Cuba's eagerness to develop a multiplicity of drugs and share them with other nations. Then it goes into a list of nations that Cuba has collaborated with. It points out that their collaboration with the Brazilians resulted in meningitis vaccines at a cost of 95 cents per dose, rather than $15 to $20 per dose. Finally, Cuba teaches other countries to produce the medications themselves so that they don't have to rely on purchasing them from richer countries, or for that matter, from Cuba. Okay, I have to cut this off for now. But the point is, they have a medical care model that is extremely comprehensive. It is personnel intensive. It has a high standard, okay, of research. It has achieved terrific results inside of Cuba and in other countries as well. And we do not study it. We do not borrow anything from it. When the Cubans have offered help to ourselves, we have actually rejected such help. Uh, we don't try to develop that kind of comprehensive system here, okay, in this country, which is to our detriment. The Cuban doctors go to the patients. They go to the communities where they are treating people. In the United States, we tell people to go to agencies on, on, on instead. There's someone from Cuba, a doctor, her name is Dr. Barbara. She's working in a coalition. I'm sorry, Dr. Barber is working in a coalition in the South Bronx in the Whitehaven area, which is not all that far from where I grew up. As in Cuba, they're trying to identify those in the community who are vulnerable, including, quote, the elderly, people who have infants and small children, homebound people, people that have comorbidities, okay, right, okay, and multiple morbidities, and are really susceptible to a virus like this one. As they discover who needs help, the organizations that are working in collaboration with the medical people seek resources to help them, such as groceries, PPE, okay, medications, and treatment. In short, the approach of the coalition is to go to homes to ensure people do not fall through the cracks. In contrast, our national policy is for each state and each of the municipalities to do what we feel like doing, which means that instead of having a few cracks that a few people fall through, there are enormous chasms with large groups careening over the edges. What countries with market economies need are actions like those in the South Bronx in Cuba carried out on a national scale. And I agree, that is what we need. This is what Che envisioned in 1951, decades before COVID-19 jumped from person to person. Che's imagination went from doctor to doctor, or perhaps other many shared their own visions so widely that after 1959, Cuba brought this revolutionary form of medicine anywhere it could. Obviously, Che did not design the intricate inner workings of Cuba's current medical system, but he was followed by healers who wove additional designs into a fabric that now unfolds across the continents. At certain times in history, thousands or millions of people see similar images of a different kind of future. If their ideas spread broadly enough during the hour that social structures are disintegrating, then a revolutionary idea can become a material force in building a new world. I wanted you to hear this from me, even though it was very long, because first, it's a really, really inspiring story. But second, it exposes what the United States, if we had been ready, could have done here when the COVID virus arrived. What it could have done here. So, what are the results with respect to Cuba? Okay, and with respect to COVID. Okay, so let us see. Let us see. Unfortunately, I cannot. I think I just saw Cuba go by quickly. So let me do that. Let me find it again. I thought I spied it. Uh-huh. Here we are. So Cuba had 2,219 cases. Population of Cuba, okay, is about 11 million people, as I recall. It has had only 84 fatalities. Okay, that's all. The population, okay, of New York City is something like uh, um, um, 8 million people. Now, going to the USA, and going to the States, okay, going to New York State. So New York State has had 30,741 fatalities. If I am not mistaken, close to two-thirds of them have been, okay, in New York City. So we're talking 16 to 17,000 fatalities from COVID, okay, in New York City, which has a smaller population than Cuba by 3 million. So there's your comparison in terms of fatalities per million. New York City is running at something like 2,000 fatalities per million, and Cuba is running at somewhere between 7 and 8 fatalities per million. I believe New York City is often considered to have among the finest hospitals in the world and some of the finest people and doctors in those particular hospitals. But it didn't much help the residents of New York City compared to the help that was given to the residents of Cuba by their medical system. You can see these stark differences. So let us go away from that now and let us go back to the beginning. We have a government that is failing us, in the way that it has helped us or has not helped us to manage the COVID-19 crisis. It's among the worst places in the world for that. Yes, there are 7 or 8 countries that have done worse. Yes, that is quite true. If you look at it on a deaths per million basis, I believe the United States is currently at 7th or 8th in the world in terms of the fatalities per million right now. So it has a really bad record. And in terms of fatalities per million, Cuba has among the best records in the world, though there are nations that have done even better, such as Taiwan, for example. As I've said here on a number of occasions. We can see, though, that our government has utterly failed to manage the crisis. It's on the point of failure in managing the economic shutdown that is due to the crisis. Part of its failure to treat the virus crisis is that it fails to offer medical care as a human right to all the people in the United States. It fails to implement a Medicare for All program or a national health service. It has failed to resource the medical community in a proper way because it leaves the resourcing of the community to a market economy and to the profit motive. So it has failed us when it comes to Medicare for All. It fails us when it comes to exacerbating the inequality we have in this country. It fails us when it comes to helping us to meet an economic crisis. Our representatives, our president, the people in our Congress refuse to legislate in the interests of the people and for the public purpose. They are utter and abject failures. They deserve to be system have utterly failed, and we will fail too if we do not kick the overwhelming majority of them out of office. Now, when the next election comes, and if there's no election, then we must do whatever we must do to get rid of them immediately, because they have totally failed us. I will now turn to your comments. First, though, once again, that is the link to my YouTube. And that's my Patreon link at patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. I won't force that on you for too much longer. And I will now read your comments. Hope you like this, everybody. I've been over the first few comments. Hi, Charles Lovett. Kay says it's quite a speech by Bernie. I saw it yesterday. It was a pretty good one. Steve says Kashama got tear gassed very badly in Seattle. Yeah, I saw her say she got tear gas, but she didn't say it was very badly. Sandy says hello. Kay says, hey, Sandy. Hi, Kay. Kay says Tucson, Arizona is a huge wildfire too now. Steve says I've been locked up for a week. But did you miss me? Yeah, we did. Why have you been locked up for a week? Have you been physically locked up, or did you just mean on Facebook? Sandy says, yay, Paula Jean. Steve says, I think Paula Jean can win. I think she can win, too. I think I heard they got some wins for progressives in the Nevada primary as well. Russell says, Arizona's too damn hot for masks. Probably it is, but they need to wear the masks anyway. I think the problem is they also think it's too damn hot for the virus, but evidently not. Kay says that Mays, Arizona is kind of a strange place. Lots of legal immigrants there. They're legal immigrants. Westside, I was crunching numbers from my county of 100,000 people today. We have almost 5,000 reported cases with around 150 deaths and 755 hospitalizations. It is close to 1 in 5 that die if they have to go to the hospital. Yeah, I guess they don't treat people very well in your local hospitals. On the other hand, there may be many more cases. As you indicate, there are 5,000 cases. So the fatality rate on that basis is high, but not quite as high. What is that about? Maybe 3% case fatality rate. Consistent with a lot of the rest of America. Joseph Segura says I'm being extra careful, and if I had an elderly family member, I would certainly not risk hurting them. No economy is worth killing off our elders. Well, the point is we don't have to sacrifice the economy. We can provide for people anyway, because we don't have to believe in the deficit myth. Russell says on April 25th, 2020, 1,460 recorded cases. Today, 6/11/2020, we're at 4,980. Isn't that over a 200% increase in cases? Yes, I think it is. The increase is 200%. Altogether, it's 3 times the number of cases. Joseph Segura says, what country are you in? Russ says, I'm in the state of Georgia, U.S. Sandy says, shared. There's going to be a lot more cases because yesterday all those people had to stand in line for hours and hours and hours to vote. Joseph Segura says, I'm in New Mexico. Here I am. Our infection rate is continuing to climb. Our native peoples are in extreme danger. I'm sure that's true. I'm sure they're in extreme danger in Arizona too. Kay says, I heard Canton, Ohio is on for the football Hall of Fame Fest this year. I think that is a huge mistake. Our county has had less than most other counties in the state up until now. It is a huge mistake. And New Mexico is also under huge fires. That's climate change, folks. Lana says, here in Minnesota, we seem to be on a downswing with COVID. I'm glad, but I know that can change. Kay says, Joseph Segura, what parts of New Mexico have fires? Lana says, Mitch needs to be drop kicked out of the Senate as soon as possible. Frankly, I think all the Republicans need to be drop kicked out of the Senate as soon as possible. And very many of the Democrats too, but every single one of the Republicans. And Joseph gives a link, nmfireinfo.com. And another link, citizensforethics.org. Trump removed the watchdog investigating Elaine Chao, McConnell vetted replacement. Yeah, McConnell's wife, Elaine Chao. Elaine Chao McConnell vetted the replacement, yeah. Lana says, yes, I saw that. Kay says, looks like the southern areas in New Mexico, too. Joseph said, all Congress is full of frauds. Yes, monsters in Congress. It's up to us to remove the monsters. Deborah says, thank you all for the good scoop, Joe. Well, thank you, Deborah. Thank you for coming. Joseph says, what will the DNC do if Biden passes away? I hope they'll finally do what they should do and nominate Bernie. But Kay is probably right. She's probably put in another corporate to replace him, Joseph, SMH. Who is the host? Joe Firestone? Yes, that's who I am. I am your host, Joe Firestone. Stephanie says, sorry, I'm late again. Had a horrible day. Just got settled in. Good to see you anyway, Stephanie. I'm sorry you had a horrible day. But I'm glad you're here. Kay says, hi, Stephanie Smith-Udy. Steve Wolfbrand says, oh, Motorcycle Diaries, a good movie about young Che. I've never seen that movie. I got to look for it. Motorcycle Diaries. That sounds like a good one. Kay says, I think I might need to move to Cuba, laugh out loud. Huh. Well, maybe Michael Moore will take you there on his next trip, Kay. Stephanie Smithy says, oh my fucking God, I just got a warning for sharing this because Facebook said it was inappropriate or insulted someone. What? What did I insult? Hi, all. Facebook said this was inappropriate? What's inappropriate about it? Hey, Stephen. Hey, Kay. And hi to all my friends. Steve says, I once smuggled a large amount of medicine and medical supplies to Cuba for a doctor friend there. Got caught at the Mexican border, but they let me go, laugh out loud. And the Mexicans let you go or the U.S. let you go? Steve Wolfbrand said, we don't need no stinking badges, Steve. You should write a book. And Russ says, I bought a box of 3mm 8511 N95s today for my business. $190. Include shipping and tax. In normal times, they cost about $45 for a box of 10. What choice do I have? I'm 60 with an 87-year-old dad to take care of. Getting sick isn't an option. I bought some cheapy N95s today at the hardware store to back up. They aren't really high grade, but I don't care. My 3M 8511 masks have something called a cool flow valve. When I go into a home to tune a piano, I have to cover the valve with Stephanie says, there, finish sharing. I guess it was just a warning. I wonder who and which group complained. Yeah, I wonder who also. Steve says we bought the shit in Mexico to bring to LA and then to Cuba. But American Border Patrol caught us. I explained that I was trying to save some lives. They looked the other way and said, don't come back. Oh, that was nice. And Warren Chamberlain said, Viva Cuba. Sandy said, but Russell, if you cannot blow out a candle wearing your mask, you're good. And Sandy said, you should be able to go into your Facebook and it will show you what group complained. You can also check to see if there are any negative comments, or emojis. But said I need to bow out and call it a night. Enjoy your Friday. See you again soon. Thank you for coming, Russ. I will enjoy Friday. I'll see you on Saturday. Sandy says, then just get rid of the group. It's not worth keeping if you're always going to jail. Kay says, night, Russell. Sandy says, night, Russell. Dolores says, good night, Russell. Deborah says, good night, good talk. Dolores says, good night, Deborah. Joseph Segura says, thank you for all the great information. You're welcome, Joseph. Hope to see you again. Steve says, New Zealand is now completely COVID-free. That's what they say in New Zealand, and they have done a wonderful job. Sandy says, it's disgusting how the government treats us. Kay says, failed country. Sandy says, we're a third world country. Sandy says, hi, Joanne. Kay says, need a revolution now. Joanne says, vote out all. Steve says, just the Fash book pen, Joe. Sandy says, best live stream on Facebook. I wish everybody thought that, Sandy, but thank you. I scrolled too far, so I got to scroll back. Kay says, we need a revolution now. Joanne says, vote out all. Joanne says, all neoliberal centrist politicians must go. Sandy says, best live stream on Facebook. I think I'll read that a few more times. Joanne says, smoke from fire in Houston, Tucson is ghastly. I'm wearing my mask. Oh, are you in Tucson now, Joanne? Joanne says, if you have MMT candidates, please support them. Trying to get McSally voted out here. I think you're going to succeed. It doesn't look good for McSally right now, thanks to Donald Trump. I'm sure without Donald Trump, she probably would have done maybe 50-50 with Mark Kelly, who is not the most attractive of Democratic candidates, if you've got a progressive point of view. Kay says, we're too progressive for Facebook, Joe. Laugh out loud. Joanne says, Facebook doesn't like truth. And Lana said, Joanne, we need a lot of progressive candidates to support. Steve says, just the Fash book pen. I read that already. Sandy says, I got the same warnings about this stream, and I figured out the group it came from and deleted it. I don't remember who. Oh, it's too bad. I'd like to delete them too, if I have them. Joanne says, yes. Kay says, I really love the way we all actually talk to each other on this stream. So do I, Kay. So do I. It's a great stream. I love the back and forth, too. Okay, I guess we're about done. It's 11:05. It's been a great 2 hours. So thank you for coming. On Saturday, I expect a great time, too. Sherry Wise is coming, and we're going to be talking about antitrust issues. More specifically, hang on a second. Let me see if I can get a more specific thing for you. Hang on one second. Sometimes Facebook is awkward to manipulate. The title will be Antitrust, the dirty little secret of economic policy. And my special guest will be Sherry Wise, PhD. So you're going to have two PhDs talking to each other on Saturday. Sherry has worked for the Department of Agriculture for some time, has a great deal of experience, and has been studying antitrust issues for a very long time. And I expect to have a great talk with her on Saturday. So I hope you'll all be here. And now I'm going to say good night. Yep, I'm going to miss you all tomorrow night too. Sadie says, thank you, Joe. I might miss Saturday, but I would at least try to get some shares in. Thank you, Sandy. I'll hope to see you Saturday. I'll hope that you won't miss Saturday because I think that's going to be a good one. So Joanne is in Tucson. So Nomiki Konst is in Tucson too, Joanne. She was kind of chasing the fire today, trying to find out where it was, whether it was going to endanger her grandmother's house. Steve says, used to fire chase in Tucson, Phoenix, learned it wasn't such a good idea when we tried it in San Diego. Yeah, I guess San Diego had a bad time once. Dolores says, thank you and good night all. Sandy says, I read Sandy already. Kay says, thank you for another great discussion. We'll miss you all tomorrow night. Laugh out loud. Sandy says, it does sound good. Yes, it does. See you then. Bye.